Thank you so much. Thank you so much. All right, welcome, folks. I'm sure more people will be joining the call, but in the meantime, I will get us started. Welcome to the MCAN Network's Zoom today. Uh, the main program will be going till 1 o'clock, and then there'll be an open discussion for anyone who wants to stay till 1:30. Please, as you come in, rename yourself or put into the chat your preferred pronouns and your town and affiliation. Thank you. I appreciate it. And here's the instructions if anyone needs it for translation. I am the president of MCAN. My name is Fred Davis. Welcome, everyone. MCAN seeks to accelerate equitable decarbonization in Massachusetts by empowering local residents, advocates, and community members to take action. We've been around for 25 years. There are thousands of us climate activists in this network in Massachusetts. So if you've ever wondered, you are not alone. You are part of a wide and broad and deep network. Our programming serves a variety of purposes. Uh, it's statewide but for local organizers, for all local climate organizers. Also, we have particular programming for municipal light plant communities, and we have a separate committee going on called Better Buildings Advocates. Here's some of our recent programs over the last year, and we're going to, this list is getting pretty crowded but I just wanted to mention that a year ago, we had quite a few, or let's see, June, July, yeah, quite a few legislative updates. And today, Tristan Thomas is going to give us today's update, which, you know, nothing is constant but change. So who could have predicted where we are nationally, quite? But who could predict where we are at the state level also? And maybe Tristan will say that he could have, but in any case, we'll see where we're at. I think it's surprising, and I'm so glad you're all here to hear his report. As I said before, those that can are welcome to stay on at 1 o'clock for an open network discussion. The session is being recorded. If you do have questions, that's fantastic. Tristan is leaving time for Q&A, but please do hold your questions until after the initial presentation, at which time we'll ask, and then you can raise your digital hand, which you find under reactions to be recognized. So we're asking, please hold off on chat. Please do not chat during the discussion. And then if you're not speaking, please keep on mute. And when you do get to the comments, keep them brief. And we'll try to address all the questions and comments, and we'll do what we can. One more time, please rename or put into the chat preferred pronouns, town, and affiliation. And I just want to remind us, it's 2025, the second half of the decade. We must achieve a significant acceleration of decarbonization. And whatever else is happening, let's keep our eye on that. For those who just came in, please rename yourself in the Zoom, add your town or affiliation and your preferred pronouns. Whoops, that's not 2 p.m. And I will take this down. We'll all see each other for a moment while I say a couple of words about our speaker today. Tristan is the Vice President of Massachusetts Climate Action Network. He's a policy and political professional. His career has been at the intersection of public, private, and nonprofit sectors. Tristan joined the neighborhood-based environmental justice organization Alternatives for Community and Environment just this year. He is currently Director of Policy at ACE, where he advocates to support a healthier, more sustainable Roxbury Alternatives for Community and Environment. So, as you'll see, Tristan is a wealth of information, and we're so fortunate to have him as our speaker at this time. And with that, Tristan, take it away. Thank you very much, everyone.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Fred, and thank you everybody for being here. I'm going to pull up my slides. And let me know if that looks good, Fred. Yes?
Looks good to me. Looks good.
Awesome. So yeah, good afternoon, everybody. I appreciate the introduction. I'll just say a couple more things about myself, which is that I'm so proud to have joined MCAN in last year and to now serve in as vice president in a leadership position. And I'm so proud to have joined ACE in January of this year. Focus all my energies and attention on environmental justice. And so today I'll be sharing an overview from my perspective, given my role at ACE and the work I do around policy advocacy of where things stand at the state level in regards to climate policy. What progress have we seen? What challenges are there? And what opportunities are there for you all to engage? And so this is an overview of what I'll discuss. I'll talk through what bills have progressed through certain key committees, what bills haven't progressed yet through certain key committees. I'll talk about certain key regulatory actions that are ongoing. We're in the midst of a new legislative session, and we're focused on all these new bills and policy proposals and maybe some old ones that we want to push through. But often the most important part of moving a policy forward is implementation. And so there are some key wins and key processes from the 2024 climate bill that are going through a regulatory process right now. So I'll briefly speak to that. I'll mention some of the challenges that we're facing, I think, as climate activists and moving forward our priorities. And then again, I'm going to end with just some specific action opportunities for you to engage on issues that are important to you. Quick disclaimer, I won't go into much detail about federal actions and some specific executive orders, but we of course, all know the context in which we are and the ways that it's affecting us, and I might just briefly say a few words. Yeah, so jumping right in, what this slide is an overview of key committees that have oversight on climate policy. And so the Joint Committee on Telecommunications, Utilities and Energy, as well as the Joint Committee on Environment and Natural Resources, are the two primary committees where most climate policy and legislation is heard. It's not where all of it is heard. There are many important issues that fall before other committees. For example, at ACE, one of our top priorities is indoor and outdoor air quality and related pieces of legislation, which are before the Committee on Public Health. We also know transportation is a huge part of moving towards our climate goals. And so the Transportation Committee is also important, and you'll see that there's some others. However, again, the vast majority of bills are heard before these two committees. And so let's check in on what they've been up to in these first 7 months of the year. The Joint Committee on Telecommunications and Energy has held 6 hearings starting on May 6th, and they've heard about half of the bills that they have before them to consider, or 119 bills out of 253. None of those bills have been reported or moved out of committee yet, as there are some new rules as it relates to legislation this session for the House, specifically a 60-day reporting deadline, where after hearing, there's 60 days before the bill has to be reported out of committee or had some action taken before it's sent to study and effectively killed. And so counting down 60 days after May 6th is where we can start to expect to see some movement coming out of the Telecommunications, Utilities, and Energy Committee. Um, for certain key priorities, like the governor's energy affordability bill proposal, we do expect the TUE committee to take 90 days, where they're able to apply for a 30-day extension to get it from 60 to 90 days. And so we're really like just getting started into the midst of this hearing session and hearing cycle. And there have been some important topics that have been covered so far, but there's some that haven't been touched yet. In terms of what has been covered before the CUE committee, there's been hearings on issues related to broadband and telecommunications, towing and rideshare, electric transportation, biomass, and then of course ratepayer protection and competitive supply, and many other topics that were included for the affordability bill. What hasn't been considered yet before TEE are bills and initiatives related to financing the transition and climate finance. So thinking about proposals such as an act establishing a zero carbon renovation fund, which is a policy priority that has that MCAN and ACE have supported and continue to support, or the Clean Energy Equity Act, a piece of legislation that has to do with distributing equity benefits throughout the Commonwealth. And so look out for future to be determined hearings from the TUE committee to cover some of those important topics that haven't been touched on yet. Moving on to the Joint Committee on Environment and Natural Resources, they've also hosted 6 hearings this year, and they've covered about 209 bills. 307 bills are still before the committee, so they're also roughly halfway through. However, they have begun reporting out some of their bills. Looking at the 37 bills that have been reported on that committee so far, my analysis is that most of them are relatively minor and have to do with mostly hyper local issues related to water treatment plants and other local infrastructure. However, notably, there has been a bill related to plastics that the Senate has reported out of their committee. It's not one that I'm following particularly closely, but I know that there have been many proposals related to plastics, and there's now like a sort of omnibus plastics bill that's moved out of the Senate side on the committee. Um, and then, of course, the Joint Committee on Environment and Natural Resources is considering the environmental bond bill, which is the other of the two governors' big climate-related proposals. So each of these committees has a major governor-related proposal through which they will consider the full range of policy priorities, and it's a vehicle through which many things can and likely will be attached to. And so both the affordability bill and bond bill have had hearings in the last few weeks. And so there have been opportunities for public engagement and comment. And later, I'll be talking about making sure that you add your voice to these conversations if you haven't already.
Right.
Um, can I ask folks to please remain muted if you aren't speaking? Thank you very much. Um, Looking at other forms of movement at the State House, there are the committees and all the bills that they consider, but there's also the annual state budget, which is a major initiative which sets out, state priorities and values going forward. And so I wanted to highlight this chart, which I took off of the Mass Budget website. And you can see the funding in our budget by different bucket areas over time. And if you look at FY25 and compare that to FY26 in the second column, you'll see that our funding for environment and recreation has decreased by roughly 50 to $60 million compared to last year's budget. And so there has been the beginnings of, I think, a step back from the full commitment to climate action that the state has had over the last few years. And I think this is, of course, because of the larger context in which we are operating, the federal, economic, supply chain issues. But I do find it disappointing that our funding for environment and recreation is going to be going down this year rather than up at such a critical time. And talking about a specific way that these cuts will manifest, there is the new Office of Environmental Justice and Equity, a state level agency which was created by executive order and has been doing work to integrate environmental justice throughout all of state government. It was officially enshrined into law in the 2024 climate bill. And this Office of Environmental Justice and Equity is tasked with a number of items, including developing guidance and standards around cumulative impact analyses. So looking at sort of the comprehensive environmental health impacts that a project or development might have a community. Developing standards and guidance around community benefit plans and agreements, commitments that developers make to provide benefits to community. Looking at site suitability analysis. How do we decide where things are going to be placed? All of this is coming out of again, the 2024 climate law and the new siting and permitting reforms. And so this Office of Environmental Justice and Equity has these new major responsibilities to develop these standards and guidelines, yet their budget is being cut down to $6.2 million compared to $8.7 million last year. So that's over a $2.5 million decrease, 25% budget decrease for the Office of Environmental Justice and Equity. And that's an example of just one of the environment and climate offices that is receiving budget cuts this year. I also wanted to put it in the context of, some public statements by certain legislative leaders. For example, the chair of the TUE committee has been quoted in media saying we need to reevaluate our climate goals and our ability to meet them. I find that to be concerning. I think this is a time where we need to be finding out how we can meet our climate goals and what more we need to do rather than necessarily reevaluating, our ability to reach them. Um, so yeah, I wanted to go into a little bit more detail about a couple of the major proposals that are being considered. So the energy affordability bill that the governor has proposed and has had a hearing before TUE, I put together this chart based off of a wonderful blog post written by my friend Jess at the Sierra Club. You can go to the Sierra Club blog website and find the post, and all these slides will be shared after, and I have it linked in the slide deck as well. But what that blog post breaks down is sort of the good, bad, mixed, and missing from the affordability bill. So when we think about the good, there are some progress to reducing greenhouse gas emissions. For example, removing unnecessary and polluting charges, aka incentives for things like biomass, and getting rid of the alternative portfolio standard, which is a program that also incentivized many forms of polluting technologies. Another good thing was adding labor protections around geothermal projects within Massachusetts. There's also a proposal to prevent uh, utilities from shutting off electricity during a heat wave. Currently, there are protections for ratepayers during the winter so that their health and well-being is protected even if they don't have the economic means to pay their bills. No similar protections exist during the summer. And so the government did include a great proposal to protect the health of our residents. In terms of the bad, I was disappointed to see proposals to uh, change net metering to cut incentives to many solar projects. I think in order to meet our climate goals, we want to be enabling and unlocking as many sources of clean energy generation as possible. And an important and equitable pathway, I think, is community-owned solar. And those incentives are important for smaller developers to be able to implement projects in their neighborhood. Speaking from my perspective, I thought the language around new nuclear was also disappointing. There's been a democratic process and a ballot question for voters to express how we want to see nuclear integrated into our energy mix going forward. And this bill would sort of bypass that democratic process and allow for new small modular nuclear reactors. Um, Also bad. I think there's more that could have been done around third party and competitive suppliers, thinking about not the non-major utilities and the ability for customers to procure energy from them. These companies have had a long documented history through many reports from back to when Governor Healy was Attorney General to our current Attorney General Campbell. These suppliers have been ripping off and scamming people and taking advantage of people. So I think there's much more that can be done in the bill to protect ratepayers from competitive suppliers. In terms of what is mixed, there are some proposals around Mass Save reform. So Mass Save, the state's flagship energy efficiency program that helps provide home and business upgrades, it is in need of reform to continue to be more effective in actually getting people heat pumps, getting people weatherization upgrades, and lowering our emissions. So there are some good proposals around including a distributional equity goal to make sure that environmental justice communities who haven't been able to benefit from Mass Save in the past are able to. But we think those goals could be increased. There's some positive progress around sort of consolidating the administration of Mass Save and getting rid of sort of the gas program administrators. We think there could be some further consolidation to make sure that the Mass Save program is, fully within the purview of serving community. Um, there was some progress around securitization. So thinking about how we finance the transition, there's currently a proposal around using securitization to help provide the capital for those homes that might not have the upfront cost for a heat pump. It's something that I want to digest and think more deeply about. I'm always concerned when we're finding new ways to borrow and lend money, especially to people who may not have money to begin with. In terms of what was missing from the bill, there wasn't anything around protections from data centers and other large sort of energy consuming industries that are being attracted to Massachusetts. They are currently through the Economic Development Bond Bill that passed last year, hundreds of millions of dollars of incentives for data centers to build in Massachusetts. And there's been a lot of expressed interest at the DPU. And we at ACE and our allies have concerns about the impact that this could have on electricity supply and prices for ratepayers, but also the environmental and health impacts that these projects bring. There's nothing in the bill around significantly reforming how we approach the gas system, preventing the build out, unnecessary build out of future gas infrastructure. There's also nothing in there relative to comprehensively thinking about utility rate reform and utility profits. There are some good ideas, but I think that this is the opportunity to move faster, more aggressively. I realize I've been talking about this bill for a long time just because it's so top of mind, so I'll try to move along. But feel free to save any questions for the Q&A, and I'm happy to share my perspective or to hear yours about things that have been discussed. In regards to the bond bill, sort of applying the same framework, and I'll try to move faster. What was great in the bill is funding to address PFAS. And so basic bread and butter environmental health protection issue, and the state is dedicating some resources towards that end. There was also the expansion of the Municipal Vulnerability Preparedness Grant Program, which has been a way for the state to provide funding to municipalities for their climate resilience projects. So say you need to, repair a dam in your municipality, that town was able to apply for MVP in the past. We are pleased that this program is receiving a significant expansion of money, but is also being expanded to be eligible to nonprofit organizations so that when you have a small town that may not have the staff and administrative resources to apply for the grant and to execute on it, that community can still receive the benefits of climate resilience. Um, in terms of what's bad, there has been a proposal to exempt certain housing projects from the Massachusetts Environmental Protection Act, as well as in environmental impact review generally. I believe the idea is to speed up the build out of housing, which is so desperately needed, and that is certainly a goal with which I am aligned. However, environmental impact reviews exist for a reason, and I would hope that we don't bypass opportunities for public and community engagement, as well as transparency around potential environmental health impacts in the spirit of just trying to build faster. Um, I'm always mixed about bond bills because bond bills aren't real money until they're actually, authorized and put in a budget. And most bond bills, the full amount isn't ultimately authorized. And so, we can be excited about the expansion of certain programs and the funding for it, but until we actually see the money, it's not real. And then in terms of what's missing, um, you know, uh, uh, again, one of ACE's priorities is around indoor and outdoor air quality, and we have pieces of legislation, and we have been advocating for uh, their inclusion inside the bond bill, because it is an environmental health and environmental protection issue. And given the sort of federal changes and rollbacks, whether it's funding and policy changes at the EPA, the removal of air quality data. There's a lot the state needs to do to protect the basic health of our residents. Um, so moving on away from sort of a legislative overview and some of the progress that's been made, I wanted to discuss two regulatory processes that are going on right now. The first is around embodied carbon. So if you don't know what embodied carbon is, it's simply the concept of uh, in our built environment, in the concrete, in the wood, in all the materials that we use to construct, there has been emissions that went into building and transporting those materials. So the concept of embodied carbon accounts for the pollution and emissions of the built environment. And MCAN was proud for the last 2.5 years to be working to help establish embodied carbon regulations here in Massachusetts. We received funding from the Jam Park Foundation and instituted education campaign and policy advocacy campaign, again, over the last 2.5 years. Many of it, and I think many of you on this call probably helped and participated on that. And all that culminated in the 2024 climate bill, with the creation of an embodied carbon task force. There's a long acronym which you'll see on the screen. But this task force is now currently working to develop sort of recommendations around regulation and legislation for embodied carbon in Massachusetts. And I should mention embodied carbon has been estimated to account for as much as 28% of all greenhouse gas emissions. And so it's a significant chunk of what needs to be addressed in order to reach our climate goals. And so the task force exists, and MCAN is proud to continue to champion and be leading on this issue. We recently hired this wonderful young gentleman, Jack, who is our new embodied carbon policy director. And Jack has been leading MCAN's effort on tracking the task force, that's providing comments and to help others engage on the development of these regulations. And so I want to plug for all of you, if you have an interest in embodied carbon or you just want to know more about what MCAN is up to on this issue, I included Jack's contact information on this page. The next major regulatory proceeding that I wanted to discuss is the siting and permitting reform coming out of the 2024 climate bill. And so each of these five sort of columns represents its own official process where a state government body is drafting regulations. And so the Energy Facilities Siting Board, the body that provides permits for energy facilities in Massachusetts, will now have expanded responsibilities as it relates to clean energy infrastructure and will be issuing consolidated permits for these facilities. So rather than the current model of having to get a local permit for this, a municipal permit for that, a state permit for this, and having to navigate those differing timelines and agencies, everything is being consolidated under the EFSB, and there are going to be new requirements around the process. And so some of those other buckets get into that. There's a similar process happening for municipal reform. And so, if your project's above a certain number of megawatts, it'll fall under the EFSB process. If it's below, it'll fall under the DOER process around creating these consolidated permits. Now, these consolidated permits will have stipulations around things like site suitability and community benefit agreements and cumulative impact analyses. All these phrases and terms are tools and mechanisms to promote environmental justice in the siting and permitting process. So when we think about site suitability, we're thinking about the historic distribution of infrastructure, of pollution, of benefits, and where they currently exist in Massachusetts, and using that to help guide where we want to build in the future. So for example, we can think about, we want to build a bunch of solar in Massachusetts, but we wouldn't want to do that by cutting down a bunch of mature forest. And so the site suitability process will help sort of navigate and set out the guidelines for how facilities are permitted and under what rules they have to follow. Um, the a big win, a big win out of the 2024 climate bill was the creation of the Intervenor Support Grant Program, which was a big priority for the Environmental Justice Table, a coalition of which ACE is a part. And this grant program is designed to help uh, community members, climate activists like you and me, and folks who aren't lawyers to engage in official Department of Public Utilities proceedings as it relates to things like rate reform and setting the rules for utilities. And so this is an important program that was funded to the tune of $4 million in the budget. That was a good thing in the budget that I forgot to mention. And so each of these buckets has, again, an ongoing regulatory process where there are proposals being put out and comments are being solicited. And so these are opportunities for folks to engage on an important issue. So now that I've provided a little bit of an overview of the legislative and regulatory, I just wanted to talk to some of the challenges that I think are impeding climate progress here in Massachusetts. Of course, the federal landscape, the EPA has lost a ton of funding. Many nonprofit organizations have lost a ton of funding. There's all the sort of the direct impacts. There's also the indirect impacts when we think about cuts to food security, housing, healthcare. All these things have second order effects where the state of Massachusetts is going to have to reorient and figure out what gaps need to be filled and how they're going to be filled. And we're seeing that manifest already again in budget cuts. The FY26 budget has less money for environment than it did last year. And that's in large part because of the uncertainty and impacts of the federal landscape. And then there's, of course, all the policy elements, such as, changing solar and wind credits in the IRA and so on. Um, However, I would like to put more emphasis on state commitment as being a challenge. Whatever we can only control what we can control, and what we can control is what happens in the state house and the state legislature. And I have been again concerned with some of the rhetoric and statements and direction from some leaders in regards to our commitment to climate, our climate goals, reducing emissions, and environmental justice. Um, there are so many timely issues. We can think about, immigration, food, healthcare. It's on us as advocates to make sure that the state is continuing to value and prioritize climate and environment as a top issue, one that is bread and butter and affects everyday people and is not secondary to, other things that might seem more direct. And that touches on the last challenge, which I think is advocate coordination. Everybody here on this call is probably here because they work in the environment space in some capacity, and I'm sure we all work together in various ways. However, we don't always do a great job of coordinating around different campaigns and efforts, and we have to do a better job of keeping each other educated and informed of opportunities, but also to support each other and delivering on it. We're all overwhelmed and busy and stretched thin. And so we have to do what we can to support each other to make sure that we can all contribute. And so to get more specific to that, I wanted to, propose some calls to action for everybody on the call in regards to some of these specific items that were discussed. So what's one thing, and I'll back up and say my call to action that I'm proposing is nothing new. It's not revolutionary. It's not a magic bullet. It's really a call to do much of what we've already been doing, but to do it better, to do it more effectively, to do it more efficiently, to do it with more passion and commitment and with more coordination. And so none of these things are new, but you might not have done them. And we're here to support you in doing them. And so the first thing you could do is provide testimony, whether this it's the energy affordability bill, which just had a hearing, and I forget whether the official window for written testimony has closed. Whether or not it has, we should always be sending our voices and written comments to legislators. And so don't worry about whether or not you missed a deadline. Always express yourself, always make your voice heard. If you're not at the table, you're on the menu. And so on these slides, which will be sent out, there are links to various kinds of either testimony that has been provided by an environmental justice group, a link to official state resource about opportunities to engage, or a toolkit on how to draft testimony and reach out to your legislators. Each of those sort of purple underlined are links to help you follow through on providing testimony on these issues. And so, again, if you haven't made your voice heard on the energy affordability bill, the bond bill, in the siting and permitting process, on embodied carbon, if you care about air quality, we have resources for you there. If you want to take a look at ACE's policy agenda or the Mass Power Forward agenda, on which MCAN, we serve on the steering committee for Mass Power Forward, or Sierra Club, or many of your groups out there, um, make sure that you're making your voice heard, because as a professional lobbyist, whenever I write or talk, I can almost see and hear the experts' eyes roll, because they hear from us all the time and they just need to hear from more volume of people. The next thing you could do is reach out to your legislators in the administration. So yeah, send those official comments, participate in the formal processes, but also engage the people. Our decision makers are human beings that live and work in our communities. And so form a relationship with them. They're accountable to you. They work with you, and you care about something, it's okay to reach out. In particular, if you live in one of these districts that has a legislator who's in a key position. And so I'm thinking about House and Senate leadership. I live and work in Roxbury, and I have a wonderful representative, Rep. Sam Montano, who champions just about every piece of environmental justice proposal that we support. And she only represents Roxbury. She doesn't represent Quincy or Braintree or these other areas where their senior leadership are ultimately making the shot calls. And so if you are on this call and you don't know who your rep is, please take a moment to look them up, malegislature.gov. You can also follow the links here on the slides once they go out. And double check, is your legislator, do they serve as a chair of a key committee? Are they on leadership? And if so, you have extra responsibility to reach out to them to help organize and to help advocate. Um, the next thing you could do is show up. Show up to events like these, show up to coalition meetings, show up to in-person events, show up to hearings, build community, keep the momentum going and build a space where there's other people around us, who are doing the same things. And so grateful for you all to be here today. Um, if you're not on our MCAN email list, sign up. If you're not on the ACE email list, sign up. If you're on too many email lists, narrow them down and focus on those coalitions on which you truly feel a connection and community. There are so many different issues that I've talked about today, and no one can work on them all. So it's okay to have a narrower focus, but it's important that you do show up for whatever it is that you're working on. And I've also linked a couple of upcoming committee hearings in case you missed them. Um, Almost at the end here. One of the last things you can do is recruit others. So make sure you're engaging your neighbors, your peers. I don't want to beat the dead horse here, but it's really about people and people power. And so if you're just one person, you're just one person. You have to be bringing in other people. And on the slide, I say pay it forward. So much of our ability to engage in advocacy is because of work that somebody did before us, whether that was to draft talking points, whether that was to schedule a meeting, plan an event, do research. We all enable each other to like come in and add our voices, add our brain power. And so what are you doing to pay it forward? The same way that you've been prepared and educated and someone's held your hand on how to engage. Now it's your turn to help hold somebody else's hand and to do that prep work to make it easier for others to engage because everybody's working their 9 to 5s. We're all trying to pay our bills and we're also busy. And so, if nobody's helping us, it's going to be hard to jump in. And then the last thing is to just be persistent. We're in this fight for the long run. It's an intergenerational struggle. We're not going to win everything tomorrow. We're not going to lose everything tomorrow. So make sure you're prioritizing self-care and community and time to decompress. And the last thing I'll say is work smarter before you work harder. It's okay to work harder, and I think we all need to work a little bit harder, but work smarter before you work harder, so that you're saving your energy and you're protecting yourself. Um, yeah, I think that brings me to the end of the presentation. I kind of dumped a lot of information. I was all over the place. I was talking about very specific proposals. I was talking about high level things. There's a lot of things I didn't talk about and that I missed. Again, I'm just Tristan. I work for ACE. We have our policy agenda. I work with MCAN. There's a world of climate policy out there. And so I want to, turn it back to the group. If you have questions for me about things that I've discussed, about specific proposals, about climate progress, or if there's something you want to share that I didn't discuss that you think is important for this group to be aware of in regards to the status of climate progress at the State House. So yeah, thank you so much everybody for listening, and I look forward to a great conversation.
Bravo, bravo, Tristan. Thank you so much. I am jumping in here now just to remind everyone that what I said earlier was if you'd like to uh, participate in discussion, please do. And let's use the raise hand feature if you don't mind. And that's under React in the Zoom menu. And I'll try to make it so that we can see all the hands. So I love how you said it, Tristan. You covered a lot. So let's see where the people have questions. Uh, Diane, start us off. Got to take yourself off mute.
There we go. Hi. Thank you. This was really very informative. I appreciate it. But I'm Diane Turco with Cape Town Winders and Save Our Bay MA. We've been working on the Pilgrim nuclear power issue and the nuclear issue in general. We're very concerned, and thank you for bringing that up, that Governor Healy has included a Section 45 in H4144 that would repeal a 1982 public referendum law that prohibits nuclear power in the state of Massachusetts without approval of the voters. It also requires that there be a federal repository for the waste that's hanging in our state. And it also calls for emergency plannings that are effective. So we have a campaign going on that's calling on everyone to write to your legislator, especially Senator Michael Barrett, and Representative Mark Cusack, Braintree and Lexington areas, to remove Section 45 from 4144. It's very important. It's such a democratic issue that the governor has slipped this in, and we need to stand up on that together. She also mentions about small modular reactors, and I know people are becoming confused between fusion and fission, and small modular reactors, as you all know, I'm sure, is not a resolution to climate issues. So we need to really kind of put a break on that too. All right, thank you.
Diane, it's super, super, and I'm not going to comment on every comment, but just to remind anybody, let's use the chat judiciously. So if you would like to include a particular reference link, now that you've spoken about it, that'd be terrific. Thank you so much.
Okay.
And Tristan, shall I keep going, or do you want to respond?
Yeah, I'll just say thank you, Diane, and yeah, please feel free to put any links or your information in the chat. And the idea is, yeah, folks, if you feel a passion or would like to take a few minutes to add your voice to this issue, please follow up with Diane.
And I love the historical reference. What year was that? The original that?
1982.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's a huge campaign. That's when I started. And
Cool.
that there's a attempt to repeal this is so undemocratic.
Terrific. Lori.
Hi, so I'm Lori Goldner. I'm an Amherst. I serve on a bunch of different local at the university and also locally in the town committees and action boards. And I wanted to reply to the nuclear thing because I'm also a physicist, so I have some technical understanding. Small modular reactors, I agree, do not solve the problem of nuclear waste. But 1980 was a very different scenario from today. And I've been talking to Sunrise. I've been talking to different groups. I am not getting the sense that people are as against nuclear as they used to be. I've certainly changed my attitude on it. Right now, with carbon, carbon in the atmosphere is the big issue. And at least for a while, fission, small modular reactors would take care of that. So I think it is worth putting to a vote again. If there is a law in the book that says it should be put to a vote, it certainly is worth putting to a vote. There is not unanimity on this in any way. I was surprised in very progressive Amherst to hear some of the sorts of things I've been hearing. Anyway, but the other thing I wanted to say about this is that what are people doing instead is what has me worried. So there's an issue that's on nobody's agenda yet, but I think is the one that has the biggest potential to destroy the planet, which is renewable fuels, quote unquote renewable fuels. So University of Massachusetts has a 10 megawatt plant. This is something that ACE should be concerned about too. They have a 10 megawatt methane burning plant that they recently transitioned against my own, vociferous everybody's complaints. They transitioned it to diesel so that it can burn either. And the reason for that, so it will make the air dirtier for sure. They're not the only plant doing this. Every plant in the Commonwealth that burns methane, peaker plants that they have to turn on when the wind doesn't blow and the sun doesn't shine and there isn't enough battery storage, right? Those plants get turned on, they burn fossil fuels, and every one of them is talking about transitioning to renewable fuels. Renewable fuels nowadays, renewable diesel in particular, it's a long story and I will make it very short. It was originally envisioned as a temporary solution for transportation where there was no other solution, where there were no, shipping, aviation requires fossil fuels and will for a while. So what do? You make renewable fuels, okay? Even at that level, there is not enough renewable ability in the world, meaning, really renewable sources of these fuels, okay? And now they're talking about burning them in power plants. The TVA has done a test of one of their biggest power plants of burning renewable diesel. UMass has been starting to burn renewable diesel. Every plant in the Commonwealth is doing this. And the big problem is that where this stuff is coming from, because there is not enough waste oil in the world to make it renewable, or even locally planted soy, it's coming from Indonesia, it's coming from Brazil. Brazil just put billions of dollars into palm oil reservations to make renewable diesel. Palm and soy grown renewable diesel is worse than pulling fossil oil out of the ground and burning that. It's worse. Its life cycle impact is worse. So that is a problem. There needs to be regulation around this, and there is none as yet. And I've been waiting for it. I've been talking to my representatives. I've been publishing in local, sending letters to local papers, making a stink on every committee I'm on. and nobody's paying attention to it. And the use of renewable diesel, quote unquote, in this country in the last few years has done this. We're an importer of soy now. We used to make it from our own soy. It's exponentially increasing, and it's because of this, I believe, I don't know yet, but I believe it is because of this increase called for by fossil fuel plants. So if I have a choice, and this is where it comes back to the nuclear, if I have a choice between a peaker plant that burns Indonesian renewable diesel and one that is a small modular reactor, I would take the small modular reactor in a heartbeat, because that's how bad things are right now. So I will, that's just the two separate issues there. Two separate
I
issues.
appreciate it. I appreciate it, Lori. And Diane, I know you probably are desperate to respond, and I apologize. I'm gonna have to ask you to maybe put it in the chat or follow up offline. And I'm gonna have to leave in the next 10 minutes. I just want to make sure I'm able to respond to and answer anything. Just sharing my thoughts and perspective. It's what you just shared, Lori. One, thank you for sharing an issue that I don't know much about around renewable diesel, and I definitely would love to learn more. If there's a way that folks can get connected to that, if there's existing resources, please send them to us, and we can, try to circulate it around to folks. Um, in regards to the nuclear issue, I'm not a scientist, and I haven't done a deep review of the literature. So I'll be clear that when I'm speaking for ACE on our position on nuclear, it's around the sort of democratic process issue, and making sure that we have a voice as community members and environmental justice communities on the future of the grid.
Great. Okay. Other questions and comments? And
if I can, I'd be happy to work with MCAN on this, and maybe even, lead a research study. If I'll reach out to you, Tristan, I guess, or should I reach out to you, Fred, Tristan, or anyone?
All of us.
Okay, all of us. Okay, I'll try to figure out how to reach out.
Tristan at massclimateaction.net, Fred at massclimateaction.net, and I'm going to be presumptive here and say you can CC Jack at massclimateaction.net as well.
other questions and comments? Back to the wide variety of wide array of areas that Tristan has already touched on. Jack.
Yeah, hi everyone. Tristan, thank you for that presentation. Thank you for the shout out for MCAN's embodied carbon work. I was interested to learn more about the rules change that you mentioned, how that sort of changed the reporting deadline for committees. And I have heard in the past and heard from other people in the past about issues about transparency in the State House. So I was wondering if you could speak more to the rules changes and how that might affect climate and environmental work.
Yeah, wasn't part of the efforts, but there have been long efforts for many years to increase transparency in the State House, and they manifested in some of these rules that the House and Senate agreed to. The main highlights are what I mentioned, the new reporting deadlines, as opposed to the traditional so-called Joint Rule 10, where, early in the second year of a two-year session, so it would have been 2026, everything sort of gets piled up to this late deadline, and all these bills that might have had hearings months ago just sit and sit, and then they wait until the last minute, and there's sort of a last push. Instead, we're going to have this new for the House, 60 to 90 days after hearing, there has to be action taken. 60 days by default, 30 days if they vote to agree on an extension. If we're not here, that's what they'll do for, the major pieces of legislation like the affordability bill. The other big rules change is around when we find out about hearings. And so it used to be we only got a 3-day notice. Going forward, we'll get a 10-day notice, which is actually like pretty huge. Like ideally it could be more than 10 days, but for our ability to mobilize activists and allies and to prepare testimony, that'll be a big deal. And then there's also we are now able to see certain committee votes. And so whereas before a committee could vote on a piece of legislation and we just know the sort of result, we can actually see who's voting one way or another on specific pieces of legislation. So those are three big transparency updates that I think will improve Democratic engagement. And on the Senate side, their reporting deadline is December. And so, yeah, they don't have the same 60 to 90 days. And so I think for the most part, the Senate will try to move, like if the House moves a bill, the Senate will try to move it shortly thereafter. But it is possible that we can have a situation where the House moves something like tomorrow and the Senate doesn't move it all the way until December.
Tristan, can I follow up on that while we're waiting to see if others are going to have particular questions? Just as activists and advocates, and I appreciate everything you said about us all being engaged, but are there, should we expect that there'll be particular calls as bills get reported out, or before they get reported out? What do you think folks should expect, and will there be um, will it come? Will there be better spacing, or will it still be all in a torrent?
Not sure I fully followed the question. You're asking if things will still be bunched together despite the new rules. Yes and no. Yes, because that's what they'll do. You know, they always leave things to the last moment and jumble it together. But no, because they have these new hard deadlines. And so TUE had a hearing on May 6th. They have 60 days to May 6th to move. And then for the hearing that they had, a couple weeks ago, they have 60 days from then. And so they do have like some sort of formal framework to move things along. But I do expect that things will still, sort of get jumbled together.
And what might that mean for us as activists? When would we be particularly useful to raise our voice?
Now. So any bill that has a hearing, like you should be going all the way on it, which is why on the calls to action I mentioned all those specific ones that had hearings recently. So the energy affordability bill and the bond bill, those are the two like big packages that will have various kinds of policy priorities. If you haven't had your voice heard on it, now's the time.
Okay, I'll make one more pitch because Tristan will have to leave at 1, and we can continue any discussion on any topic. But while Tristan is here, does anybody want to pipe up about any particular aspect of legislation, for instance, that they are already working on, that they're already paying attention to? Maria, you're muted.
Sorry about that. So Senate 2301, Paul Mark is the main sponsor. And it's an act enabling municipal aggregation. And basically, it makes it so that cities have more control over the production of energy. And this works away from utilities making the decisions about everything. And also, it takes the profits for the production of utilities away and put it in the hands of municipalities. And it makes it so that they have the DPU has to approve of these facilities, these generators for the cities within a certain amount of time rather than delaying it. So it puts more power in the hands of cities and or towns, and that when we have this aggregation, and a lot of communities have aggregation, but a lot of what says is aggregation of renewables is RECs, which doesn't work very well and isn't really about renewables. And so this way, the city could actually have solar on buildings and feed it right into their communities, or at least right into the building that they have without having to go through the grid. So I think that's an important piece in all of this. That's all I have to say.
Yeah, thank you so much for mentioning that. Municipal aggregation isn't an issue that I follow particularly closely, but I know that MCAN and our one of our longtime members, Phil Thayer, helps participate on a municipal light plant sort of committee or coalition, and might be following that more closely. That said, sounds to me like that's the type of policy proposal that could be included in the energy affordability bill. And if you haven't reached out to the TUE committee about including that specifically, I would.
Okay, thank you.
And Maria, for everyone's benefit, could you just repeat in the chat the reference, please?
It's an act enabling municipal aggregation, and it's 2301, Senate 2301. I don't have that.
I just dropped a link for the bill text in the chat.
Okay, thank you.
So I will, Tristan, you do have to hop. I know that you've said that, and I just want to reiterate on behalf of everyone attending today and the entirety of not just MCAN, but the entirety of the movement, how valuable your work is, and you're sharing it with everyone else. Thank you so much for everything you do, and thank you so much for today. Round of applause.
Thank you, Fred. I appreciate it, and I hope there was at least one piece of information that was helpful to you all. And you all should feel free to reach out to me and follow up on things. I am a little bit overwhelmed right now. I know there's at least one connection I have to make for somebody on this call that I said I would last week, but please do follow up and reach out if you have any questions or like to connect on advocacy. Even if I can't help, I'm sure MCAN can find you someone else who can. With that, I'm gonna sign off. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you again, Tristan. And for everyone else, you're welcome to stay on, and we will be moving this to an open discussion on any topic that anybody wants. And that presumes that people have topics that they would like to talk about. And we'll find out. I do have a teaser to start if nobody's ready to jump. Well, not teaser, but my inquiry for everyone is who, and I know we're talking about state engagement on this presentation that Tristan just gave us. And he did tell us that it interacts certainly with the federal situation. And I just want to ask who here was involved with last week's protesting, mass protesting that happened. Anybody participate in a local protest last week or do any organizing around it? And I guess my particular question is, if you do go to the mass protests that happen, are you feeling like climate is getting aired? When we talk about the bad things going on at the federal level, is climate getting addressed or heard? Or is it getting short shrift? Janet, thanks for putting your hand up.
I was at the Concord protest, and climate certainly did get some coverage, but it was more, no kings, protect democracy, various anti-Trump comments, but climate was there on some people's posters, and I believe there were about 250 people out in the middle of Concord.
Thanks. And I guess another corollary to that is, are people noticing that the organizing for the national protests, for the mass protests, is any of that happening through your climate organizations, your local climate groups? That is something I'm particularly curious about.
Not that I've
Concord
seen.
Visible definitely has an interest in climate, and they're the people who led the protest.
Cool. And somebody else was speaking.
I was just saying the local groups that I'm involved in have not been involved in organizing the protests. So the individuals go, but there's been no organizing.
And I guess to tie it back to today's topic, I wonder what people think about, to the extent that you're organizing or you're involved with the local organizing or organizing effort, are people distracted to pay attention to our state house developments? Are people distracted by the federal travesty? Are they demoralized?
Yeah. Yeah, so demoralized for sure, but I think everybody's attitude here is we're gonna buckle down and do what we can locally. So there's been a lot of local work. I mean, the work hasn't stopped, right? And if anything, people are more active locally, but nobody expects anything from the federal government for the next few years. At least that's what I'm seeing.
Nina.
Hi, I am a member of a union, SEIU Local 509, and I just want to point out that unions often have climate, excuse me, climate and environmental justice groups, and we don't tend to organize the events. We go to the events of other organizations wearing our purple. And I would say that most members are, sure, everybody's at one level demoralized, but we know that we have to move and nationally, but we also have to move at the state and local, levels, both levels, state and local, to make climate change. And so, 350 Mass has lots of members of unions, and so I mean, it's part of the solidarity that existed, but it needs to get stronger, and it is getting stronger.
Thank you very much. Yeah, stronger and solidarity. I love it. And no slippage. I think that's one thing that's alarming when Tristan gives his reports, is hearing about slippage at the state level. And here's a thought. See if anybody likes this. And you don't have to comment, but I'll just throw it out there. Next time we announce that there's that MCAN is going to put out a notice about a national protest. In this last one, by the way, it probably was more, but at one point I counted there were 38 different Massachusetts sites for last week's protest. But anyway, maybe we should ask, just brainstorming, do people want to put out climate-related messaging that they could put on signs or put forward to their local climate groups so that the climate messaging continues? I think that'd be good for us to, that's a little exercise maybe we could do together. All right, so that's my particular tangent. I'd love to hear anybody else's thoughts. What's going on locally, where you think attention needs to be paid. You don't know how to put your hand up, you can just take yourself off mute. We're down to few enough people. Mary.
Yes, I just want to thank everyone for staying on and continuing the important discussions that we all share. One of them that I share is that we've had power outage yesterday, and there have been power outages around our town. And one of the select board members asked the town manager to look into it, and Eversource replied that there are just too many new electric sources of demand, for example, heat pumps or car charging. And I wondered if that was what that meant. And has anyone been tracking, or is anyone have a way of tracking the reality of how much more every city and town is expanding and quote unquote forcing power outages? I know that MCAN has a wonderful new program that we're trying to inspire cities and towns to use data to understand three important energy electric using vehicles. Does anyone have any sense of how we might track the reality of how many would cause power outages? Or is that just the heat and climate change that everyone at Eversource has been saying?
Wow, Mary, this is I'm so glad you piped up with this. This is very timely if it was yesterday. And did you get it in writing by any chance?
No, it was an informal conversation. I ran into a select board member and I mentioned, I'm here because I have to get my phone charged. I can't charge it at home.
Huh?
And he said, oh, interesting. We've looked into this and the town manager is called Eversource and Eversource has said it's because there's too much demand.
I worry
Which,
very, I worry very much that that's an inappropriate and political statement. That's why I'd want to see it in paper in writing. But we got a lot of good people here. Does anybody want to put together a comment? Because everything that we've heard up until now is those uh, those prospects of decarbonization, in other words, electrification, causing local grid issues are in the future. So if somebody is claiming that it's actually in the present, this would be a prize. So anybody have any comment about this? And Mary, you did touch on, and is Xana still on the call? So I didn't. Yes, Xana, you're still on the call. So I just want to mention, as Mary said, that we are still working on, and I owe Xana communication, uh, still working on our climate goals tracker so that every town and city can get a feel for where they are with how many electric vehicles, how many heat pumps, and how much solar is installed in their municipality, up-to-date data, and what is needed for the next to achieve our goals in the next 5 years. So Xana, I don't know if you have anything more you want to say, except that it's coming soon. I want to make sure everybody hears that that tool is coming. Okay, so now you've heard. Okay, thanks for bringing that up, Mary. Anybody else want to comment on anything Mary said? It's exciting question. And another thing that's coming soon while we're doing this, and not to put you on the spot, Jack, but do you want to just give people a preview about our we're going to be beefing up our Better Buildings Advocates group, and you're going to be initiating sometime soon a survey, a reach out on local embodied carbon prospects.
Yeah, sure. I can definitely speak to the initiative that we're working on right now, and that's basically we're trying to assess all the good work that's being done in different municipalities, being in conversation in different parts of state government and in different advocacy groups around regulating embodied carbon. And what we want to do is take that and put that in the form of a municipal RFP for municipal construction and get that into a form of embodied carbon requirements that could go into those. So we're working right now in consultation with experts to develop that language, to build a sort of tool that we then can give to select advocates who could bring that language to the relevant town committee, get that on the RFP for upcoming municipal construction to ensure that those construction projects work to reduce embodied carbon impacts. So that's in the works for us right now. And going along with that, we're hoping to get a group together that's really wants to focus on embodied carbon issues, our better building advocates, embodied carbon, or maybe just building decarbonization as a whole, and trying to really build a little space, a little micro space in the MCAN network that we can have closer communication and more frequent communication between those folks who want to work on this issue. So definitely those two things are in the works. I'm excited about it, and I hope everyone else is as well.
Thanks, Jack. That's terrific. And do you mind putting in the chat one more time your email? And I'm going to give this prompt to anybody listening. Then Nina, it's your turn. But the prompt is, might you have in your locality a new construction opportunity coming up, especially if it's it's going to be municipally built? So another school, a new school, firehouse, housing, whatever. And that's where Jack will be looking to connect with you to see if we can provide useful a useful tool for you at hopefully at an early stage before the project goes too far. All right. And Nina, you have your hand up. Thanks for your patience.
No, I'm sorry to have it up twice, but there are two topics that I am always looking for climate groups to be talking about and talking about publicly, and maybe it would be something that could be put on to posters at demonstrations. That war and all the weapons of war are a huge climate issue, number one. And the whole issue of AI and the amount of energy that it uses and what that just, that's just going to counteract all of our, or rapidly counteract a lot of the work that's already been done. Yeah, I mean, everybody on the call, I'm sure knows more about it than I do. I did put in the chat, I just learned about this whole topic of embodied carbon. I don't have expertise, but I went to the town hall partly because I live in Mike Barrett's district. And I believe, having several more meetings, but the recording, as I understand it, is available at the site that you have to scroll down, that I put into the chat.
Okay, any other thoughts and comments? And of course, Nina is opening up two huge topics. Anybody want to say anything about war or AI? I will. Okay, go ahead. Go ahead, Lori.
I'll say a word about AI and data centers. I also do heat pump coaching and work in the energy transition a little bit, and I am horrified by the growth of AI. And I visit Costa Rica occasionally, and Costa Rica is one of these countries that was 100% green until they invited a data center in, and they had to fire up their oil plant in order to satisfy its needs for the first time in years. So I am horrified by their growth. I wish they would go away. I have no need for AI, and I think it makes the human race dumber. I'm sure of it, actually. So I don't really quite know how to fight that. That seems to me inevitable. And other than insisting that they put in their own, solar and wind plants, I don't know what else to do. And battery storage backup, there needs to be legislation around that for sure.
Thank you.
Right. And if I will look, I will take that comment. It makes me realize in this context that I'd love to hear what Tristan's thoughts are along these lines. Probably many of us have been thinking about AI and wondering where's the process where, we, the public, who has an interest in all the above, where's the public process? And it's purposely not public process, much of it. And that's much of the problem. So I will make a recommendation if anybody wants. David Roberts has a podcast called Volts, VOLTS. Different topics every week or so. Amazing podcast. And I just listened to a very recent one, solar and battery storage. Latest, he had two consultants from Ember, is the name of the consulting firm that just put out a report, the essence of which is that the price worldwide, the cost of batteries has plummeted just from 2024 to 2025. Is that right? Or 23 to 24? But anyway, in 1 year, 40% worldwide drop in the cost of batteries. And their analysis shows just how far on a big scale, like a city scale, a solar plus batteries can go to powering a whole city. close to 100% in some cases, but even 60% cost effectively in many cases. Now, is it a crowded, older state like Massachusetts where we don't have tons of land to put, you know, thousands of acres of solar? I don't know what happens in to their, but I'm sorry, internationally, the report is just amazing. So I have not read the report, but I listened to the podcast. It's one more time, David Roberts, Volts, VOLTS, the best podcast on climate in general. Okay, so I don't work for David, but he's great. Any other comments on any other topic? And Mary, one more time, if you what you just said about I know it's secondhand, but what somebody said from EverSource yesterday, that's pretty mind blowing. I'd love to see if we can chase that down. So thank you.
I have one last question about that whole thing that Mary just brought up. Is the nuance that's with this particular thing because it was said by someone from EverSource or whomever that it was the blackout was specifically because of heat pumps and electrification? Because is that I'm assuming that's the nuance, because isn't it a part of the larger discussion that we need to continue to increase our capacity in general for electrification? I'm just trying to get clarification so that I understand. Thanks.
Yeah, yes, exactly. The implication from the select board chair was that he'd been told, as I said before, by the town administrator who called EverSource and said, what's the cause of these blackouts, that, power or outages, that it was, the use was increasing so much. That's the report of our longstanding select board chair, who I happened to meet at a meeting. And I've been a climate activist for years, and my alarm system went off with that comment. And I really hope that we could find out what that was about. I'm going to try to track it down in my town and follow up, but I'm just wondering, other cities and towns, have you been hearing that the cause of outages in a hot summer for sure? But why were we told that?
Thank you.
Hey, Mary, you know what I just thought of? Did you mention electric vehicles and heat pumps? I forget.
Did I insert, there was a generalization about increased use, but the continued conversation with the select board member was about, oh, you mean heat pumps? You mean, heat pumps that are cooling houses on a hot day and charging more cars? And he said, oh, the select board member said, oh, well, we've got so many more charging stations. But, that's minimal really, that are town and private across a city and a town of 60,000 people.
Right. Now that we had a couple minutes, I'll add just a couple of thought. Just one more thought is that coincidence. Whether these I mean whether these things are actually happening at the same time to cause a power outage. That's what I mean by coincidence, coinciding one with the next. People are not going to be all of a sudden charging their cars because it's hot and humid. That's one thing. And the other is that heat pumps, yes, of course, people are going to be using more air conditioning, but if they're actually using more heat pumps, they're using less old air conditioners. I mean, air conditioners are heat pumps, but if people are talking about there's too many heat pumps coming on, that means if they're actually talking about new heat pumps are so much more efficient than new heat pumps are so much more efficient than old air conditioners. So,
exactly.
So right there, there's got to be some I'm worried about the politics, especially if it is coming from somebody who might know better. Okay, James.
Hi, y'all. I'm a longtime stalker, first time caller, and I'm part of a consulting company that supports California with their electrification process. I happen to live in Andover, Mass, so I'm a MCAN fan. I've been to quite a few of the Fred's, uh, what do you call those things? NERR, the renewal, the whatever that is, the one you're stopping, the at the law firm. I've been to those meetings before and seen you in action. Um, my point to add here is that whenever we have a chance to add charging or add heat pumps, uh, the idea of making sure they're a connected product that can react to a grid problem and automatically changes behavior either proactively or reactively is very powerful. And so whatever we can do to get the state to install connected equipment is very powerful, uh, initial investment in order to have reactive equipment that can support problems like this during the summer. And so the connected solutions programs that we've seen in our different utilities are an example of that. Our municipalities might have commercial equipment to install over time, and it would be great to make sure that they all use connected equipment also, even though they may not be as incentivized to do it through the utility programs. Thanks for listening.
Right. And James, when you talk about connected, is that the same as smart?
Yeah, the word smart is needs explanation almost every time. It's a great start, gets people thinking, but it usually needs another paragraph, and then you might lose the you know, the training level of the individual you're talking to, or the business part of that gets confusing, and the left, right, and left hand, right hand, and it's a holistic thing in order to have this actually work. And it takes an orchestra and a conductor and attentive instruments. And so this needs to be executed correctly. And they have that smart and connected are a thing for sure.
So glad you mentioned this. Thank you very much. All right. Any other comments? I think we've got low humidity today, lower, much, and not likely to head for 90 degrees. So for the moment, we're past the crunch, one would hope, but summer's got a long ways to go. Jack.
Yeah, I had a quick thought about the utilities because I remember back in I think February the letter that got circulated in response to the raising of the utility bills, the EverSource and I think National Grid too, both directly blamed renewable energy policy in Massachusetts. So I'm just wondering if this is like recycling perhaps those talking points to this issue. Um, yeah, just speculation on my part. Thanks.
Very good. Thank you, everybody, for staying on. This network is awesome. Really appreciate it. And let's stay in touch. And in the meantime, be cool. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, Fred.
Thank you.